Hey everyone, hopefully you're having a good day. My name's Andy. My channel's Finding Value. I was reading through the comment section. I do this a lot just to get, respond to some of your guys' questions or comments. And there's an excellent comment here or question or concern that this person has, and I really want to address it to the entire channel. And I want to give you again, if this is just my opinion, I'm just one person looking at all this data. So here it is. It says, I, for one, have done exceptionally well following your opinions over the past 3 months. I stopped worrying about the real estate crash and gained confidence in the resource bull market. My highest gains have come from uranium, and recently, thanks to you, I entered renewables at exactly the right time. I am very grateful for that. I'm expecting big returns from precious metals miners next, even though I've seen gains in oil and natural gas. This sector keeps me up at night due to the EV revolution. I fear that in the next 2 years, EVs could really start affecting the oil demand. With that being said, markets are forward-looking, so I worry about when Mr. Market turns. The last oil bull market did not have this dynamic, so using historic data by itself, in my opinion, is short-sighted. Are you concerned about EVs cutting into oil demand? If EVs do cut into oil demand, do you think supply issues will offset the demand issues? All right, so that's a great question. And when I was looking at oil in the beginning for an investment, I was also worried, just like you, with some of these people out there, and more particularly, I'll say Kathy Wood or some others, who think that these cars are just going to be built. The minerals are going to come from I don't know where, probably Mars or some other planet, or maybe I'll say an asteroid of some sort. I don't know where they're going to get all these minerals. But maybe I'll run through this. All right. So oil had a problem during the government shutdown. That shutdown from the virus. That created a huge problem. And we could see it in the ratio. So if you were to look at, and I think I actually have a ratio chart to show you here that I still have. So the ratio is in the upper left there. That's that gold to oil ratio. Let me get my mug out of the picture here. It's this guy right here. And if you look at history, we never really went above 30 too much. We went a little bit, and that was about it. And those were like extreme scenarios in the gold to oil ratio. But if you look on the right-hand side in 2020, we went to astronomically high levels, meaning that gold could buy a lot of barrels of oil, 90, 100 barrels of oil at the bottom there, signaling that we had a massive problem in oil. Something happened in oil that was so dramatic and so, it's an anomaly in history. We've never seen this before. So when things contract that amount, it causes problems in that area. So when the ratio goes to 90 to 100, or when oil went negative, what happened was all of these companies said, we can't make money. What do we do? They stopped spending in its entirety. The drilling rigs went crashing lower to levels that we've never seen in terms of how many rigs were being deployed in relationship to how many rigs we have. And it created, I think, a huge supply problem. So this is supply driven. I know you're focusing on demand, but I'm focusing on supply on this. With that ratio going where it did, it created a problem. And you could see it ripple through all sorts of whatever measurements you want. The drilling rigs coming down, production pulling on back. And this stuff, it's not super easy to just, snap your fingers and get production back online. We've also been, if you just look at history, we've been going after very high energy return oil fields, and that's been declining over time. So over many, many years, we're going after basically, we'll call it tar sands, where you've got oil in sand that we have to literally mine and extract it out at very low energy returns. And you can see that across the entire board. We're going after harder and harder to get oil. We're going after shale oils. We're going after anything that's out there. At some point, the volume of oil, the flow of it, is going to turn down. I can't tell you exactly when, but it's sooner than what I think some people think. And it's not, you have to look at it also from how much energy is given to society from oil. We're going to start turning more energy to get energy and returning less to society from that source. So there is a part of me, and this is just deep down thinking, that governments know this and that they had to fabricate a story to, we'll call it the climate change story. And they're masking it to basically get ahead of this peak oil, could potentially be peak oil or peak natural gas or peak whatever fossil fuel, to get ahead of the curve and try to beat it. The problem is renewables are not that great. They kind of went about it the wrong way, I think. You got to build your grid and infrastructure out and your storage capacity of electricity first before you start ramping up the actual generation of electricity from renewable sources. And remember, they themselves, the energy gathering systems, are not renewable. It's a false. They're kind of feeding you lies. They're saying this is renewable energy. It's like, no, it's not. The sun is, but the gathering mechanisms obviously are not. So we're going to have to continually mine this stuff out of the ground. And I don't know if the energy returns are great enough and it's easy enough to store electricity in this new renewable energy world. We have to go to something. I just don't know if the current solutions are where it's at. So I think a good solution is obviously nuclear. And eventually, if we can figure it out, obviously fusion instead of fission. Fission is what we have with uranium. Fusion is what the kind of the sun is. So that could be a potential solution to a problem, instead of just handling what I consider to be predicaments where you have to handle outcomes. So I wanted to touch on that. So we have a supply problem. It's not necessarily a demand problem. Now, when you look at the world, a lot of countries and a lot of things that we're going to use, I think, are going to be difficult to have electricity-based solution. I mean, even people, if you look how many people park their car inside their garage. It's not even that high of a percentage. So a lot of people put some thousands of dollars worth of junk in their garage, and they keep their multi-tens of $1,000 car in the front, subject to weather. Doesn't make sense to me, but we may not have these people just plugging in electric vehicles everywhere. I mean, think of it from the basis of, you have a car for its ease of use. It's convenient. If you have to go and charge your car like you would at a gas station, how many people would actually choose an electric vehicle? It's easy if you can plug it in at your house. That's an easy solution. But what if you don't have a house? What if you rent? What if you've got 4 or 5 cars at your house and you aren't the owner of the house? What if you're a 20-year-old growing up and you have a car? Are you going to buy an electric car that you can't charge inside of a garage? I mean, there's a lot of things out there where perhaps 50 to 60% of the population will not have charging access where they live. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's 70 or 80%. What are the adoption rates going to be, and how are we going to charge these things up? Are we going to have charging stations everywhere? Can the grid handle all this? And I'm just looking at it from kind of, I'll say, a convenience standpoint. Even my parents, who have access to their house and can put in whatever they want, they have the money, they may not buy an electric vehicle for their next vehicle. And I don't know if they necessarily even care, because to them, the convenience of going cross-country and driving and just filling it up with gas, even if it's $7 a gallon, who cares? It's more convenient. It's better. I'm going to go that route. So, I mean, it highly depends on the person, highly depends on the access to charging. Also, oil is the number one commodity. It's used everywhere, not just in transportation. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. I'd have to look, but a large majority of oil production is used in a whole bunch of different things outside of transportation. And I think the people who have access to these electric vehicles are probably in the richer countries. What about the people who aren't in richer countries? Are they just going to go buy some EV vehicles and have nowhere to charge them? I don't think so. I think maybe hybrids. Maybe they'll buy hybrids. Maybe they'll buy regular internal combustion engines. Then you've got the entire, we'll call it aerospace industry. You've got planes and all this stuff. Obviously, they're going to probably be stuck with fuel. And then you've got the big trucks and all of those areas as well, who are also going to be probably using fuel-based stuff for a very long time just because of the energy density. You don't have the same energy density in electric vehicles. That's why you have to have all these batteries. They weigh a ton, probably a few tons, actually. And that's why I think the bigger object vehicles moving a lot more weight are going to stick with the higher energy dense fuels. So maybe hydrogen is a solution in that arena for flying things and big, large trucks and moving things. So that's my take on it. I think it's a supply problem, and I think that oil and natural gas are superior fuels to renewables and will be for a while, especially those types of renewables. So what's going to happen is, and what we've seen, remember, I don't try to think like the future and try to predict. What I do is I say, what do we have right now? What is the problem? And then project that forward. We have renewables going in greater quantities, and we're getting greater and greater problems. That is the fact that we have today sitting in front of us. So implementing more renewables and more EVs, is that going to make the situation better or worse? If we already implemented a bunch and it's incredibly bad, what do you think that's going to be like in the future? I don't know I don't have the answer, but I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's kind of my take on it. And we're seeing things getting worse in natural gas, and I think oil will get incredibly worse. And I made a comment about oil. My comment was, when looking at oil and the supply problem that we've had just recently here, there could be a point in 2022, 2023, I don't know the exact timing here, where the entire world is pumping flat out. We're talking flat out. Every single thing is going at full tilt, and the demand exceeds that entire supply. And I don't think we've ever had that scenario in history. We've always had some spare capacity somewhere. We've always had something somewhere. Well, what if you have a deficit that grows quite dramatically? If you don't invest into oil, the oil production declines, and it declines quite rapidly. 6% is about roughly where I would put it. If you're at 100 million barrels a day, you're going to be short 6 million barrels if you don't invest, just to stay flat. From what I gather in terms of demand, we could be exceeding 2019 demand next year at 103 million barrels is what I've been trying to find. It's about 103. If we haven't been investing in it, and it goes a few years, you could see a shortfall of 12 to 20 million barrels a day. I mean, think about that for a second. 12 to 20 million barrels per day of a 6% decline rate from 100 year over year if we don't invest at all. Now, if we're investing and the demand starts creeping up and we're underinvesting and the supply starts declining, we could get a big gap over a couple of years from now. It could be a very large gap, depending on where that demand wants to go and where that supply is at. So I think that over the next couple of years, we could see a big problem. I mean, a big problem. We could see oil prices that you've never seen before. And this ratio could compress all the way down, that's behind me, to below 10. It could be at 5. What is a 5 ratio at gold at 2,000? Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Like $250 barrel of oil, 250. It's possible. I'm not calling for it, but it's possible. That's where my mind is at. So oil and uranium. Uranium is also a very good, I think, bet, because that's kind of your solution to all this. And the problem is, it's the storage of electricity. You can create a natural gas plant and store natural gas. You can create a uranium plant and store or nuclear and store uranium. It's very easy to do that. Oil is the same way. You can store it in a barrel. It's very cheap. You put it in a barrel, it's good. And you can use it for all sorts of things. Energy, in terms of electricity, it's like, how do you store this? In a battery? But that's super expensive and it's very cumbersome. You can't store much electricity either that way. I mean, it's something on the lines like every single battery that's ever been created in the world can store like 3 days of demand of electricity in the United States alone. So you think we're going to create that many batteries in the entire world? I don't know if that statistic is 100% right. It's something on the lines of that, of what I read. I'll just say that batteries are not very efficient at storing electricity, and it's very costly to do that. Very, very costly. Now, if it's so costly to store electricity, and renewables, if you look at the electricity rates around the world, and you look at the costs of those renewables in terms of kilowatt hours, I could make a complete justification for $2,000 a pound uranium, because it's a superior source. It's easy to store. The cost differences between renewables kilowatt hour and where nuclear is, and that delta between it, could easily absorb that price. And I'm not calling for that price, but I'm also saying that I wouldn't rule it out either. So you could consider me an ultra bull on the uranium price. And a lot of these people who think uranium's going to go to like $100 or $200 and stop, I don't know why. We can't bring this stuff online very quickly. And all these financial guys know this. Why do you think URNM is being bought out by Sprott? Why do you think they created this Sprott uranium fund? Why do you think they bought out Uranium Participation Corp? They're going to corner this thing. They're going to drive this thing to the moon. And the conditions aren't ripe yet. It's getting there. You're starting to see people turn back on their nuclear power. You're starting to see all these, like China putting in 150 new nuclear power plants. We're going to start adopting nuclear everywhere. This is going to get ridiculous. You think we have all that uranium in the pipeline? No. How fast does it take to put on a uranium mine? 20 years? 10 years? From find to production? It's probably 10 years in a lot of these areas, 10 to 20 years. What's going to happen between then and now? I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a lot of countries probably buying out our uranium companies. Literally, countries. It's a possibility. I don't want them to buy them out. I want to set these things up and run them. I want to make the money, but I think they're just sitting there waiting to be bought out. China's going to come in and buy a bunch of these. They have to. This is kind of my take. Now, that's the energy crisis there in a nutshell. And I'm not worried about oil at all. I think it's a superior fuel. It is electricity and the renewables. They don't know how to store electricity, so they're done. Like there's no way to store it. You're going to have to burn something else, and that's the problem that we're in. We've got a problem today. It's going to get worse. That's my take. I do not sleep, or I don't lose any sleep at night. In fact, when I look at my positions, I just keep thinking like, man, I was lucky when I bought. I knew what I knew, and I knew the ratios were telling me to buy it, so I just did it. And the charts looked absolutely fantastic at the bottom there. And I know a lot of you people on the channel followed along, which is great. Good for you. Good for you. But I'll talk about metals maybe next in another clip. So if you guys like this content, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thank you for listening. This is Finding Value.